Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Caleb Rothy. I'm the WGI Percussion Education Coordinator, and we are here for our final percussion community webinar of the 2019 season. Special guest this evening is Richard Kearns. Richard, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Caleb. Appreciate it.
Yeah, looking forward to this one a whole bunch. We're here together on the eve of, I think I can say this, the eve of World Championship schedules going out. I believe that's going to be happening tomorrow. In fact, Mark Thurston is sequestered on a computer somewhere else in the country, slaving over those, trying to get those complete right now. So thank you so much, those that are tuning in live tonight, for spending a little bit of time with us. And those that are viewing a recorded copy later on down the road, we appreciate you tuning in and carving out a little bit of time for us. Richard and I are going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff tonight. We're going to talk about his program, his experience in the activity. We're going to talk about reclassifications and promotions a bit, since we know that's a hot topic among the community, especially this time of year. We'll talk maybe a little bit about design and programming and stuff like that. And of course, the best part of this is fielding questions from those that are in attendance. So for everybody that's here tonight, if at any point you have a question for myself or Richard, all you have to do is to use that little chat feature, the little Q&A feature, to type in whatever question you have for us, and we will field that live on air tonight. And those of you that are tuning in on a recorded copy, just remember you're always welcome to send in questions ahead of time for these if you can't join us live, but you still have a question for one of our special guests. So, Richard, we're going to go ahead and kick this thing off. For those that don't know you and don't know your history in the activity, I'm wondering if we could maybe start with a quick little bio, and you can kind of give us a little bit of your background and where you are and what you've done.
Sure. Yeah. Started at a medium-sized high school, I guess. Never had a percussion director really growing up, so I was always just seeking out as much information about that as I could. I'd drive as far as 2 hours if I wanted to take private lessons, just so that I could try and, I guess, find a way to get the information that I was always wanting. And I think that's what kind of led me to want to teach as well. But after high school, ended up at Tyler Junior College, which is where I really got some amazing instruction from Tom McGowan, who's the director there, and then also Dusty Norris, who's the director at Clearbrook High School. He would come in every summer and really break things down in a way that I'd never had them broken down before. It was just really kind of the beginning for me was at TJC. It's just an amazing experience. And then TJC started jumping into the WGI game around 2007. And about that time, I was asked to come back and get to be a part of the staff. And that was really cool, really humbling. And got to sit and, I was just a battery tech at that time, but would be a fly on the wall. We would have Shane Gwaltney come in and do the drill and do a lot of the show design. And I'd just sit back and just kind of keep my eyes on what he was doing and listen to as many conversations as I could and see how things were put together. And, I think that was really where I knew that I wanted to get into beyond teaching and eventually start designing. Marched a few years at drum corps, Capital Regiment out of Ohio, Magic of Orlando, and then spent a summer teaching and a lot of time in WGI after that, again back with TJC. And then after that, I was really lucky to, I guess, find the dream team of directors. That was my first teaching job, which was out in the middle of East Texas at Palestine High School, really small school in the piney woods of East Texas. And but met up with the guy who I'm still teaching with today, who's our head director, Sean Murphy. And it's just been a true blessing because he's provided so much for whatever I wanted to do with the program. I think the really cool thing about Palestine was that we could do whatever we wanted because we were out in the middle of nowhere and nobody cared. If we screwed up, nobody saw it. It didn't matter. If we did something good, then it was always a miracle story. It wasn't just like the normal thing for something good to happen, I guess. So I was really, really fortunate to get that experience because I could screw things up one day and come back and start over, and again, nobody cared. So it was a really, really great experience. And then beyond Palestine High School, our staff moved together to Azle High School, Northwest Fort Worth, where we spent 4 years at Azle. Started the indoor program there, went to Dayton twice, 2015, we were promoted to Scholastic World about this time that year. So have some experience with the promotional process. But we can talk about that as actually just a really great thing. And then after 2015, we ended up coming to Burleson Centennial, where we knew there'd be some amazing opportunities to continue to hone in what we've been doing and try and take it to another level. And then beyond the Burleson Centennial program, I've gotten to work with a lot of different programs across the country. Still currently a visual designer, and one of the program coordinators for Vigilantes Indoor Percussion, along with a number of different high school groups. Unionville High School out of Pennsylvania goes to Dayton every year in A class, and just feel really, really fortunate to get to teach full time, but also still be able to love filling that creative niche of working with different programs.
Awesome. Can you, I think you said 2015 was your last year at Azle. Did you start at Centennial the year after that? How many years have you been at Centennial?
Yeah, this is the fourth year at Centennial.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tremendous. So with a program where you've only been there 4 years, or, really 3.5 years, I guess, going into your fourth year, tell me a little bit about maybe what you learned from some of the other programs that you referenced, Azle, Palestine, some of those other ones, that really helped you once you got to Burleson Centennial, because you have very quickly built quite the powerhouse at Burleson Centennial. We're going to talk about that quite a bit tonight, but I'm wondering if maybe you could share with us some of those things that you learned that you're able to bring with you that helped you at Centennial.
Sure. Yeah. When I got to Centennial, the students were really well-rounded, had great education, awesome teachers all the way through. And I guess kind of what I learned from the previous experiences was, one, at Tyler Junior College, we were forced to go so slow in the summer. And it was just all about summer, slow, that's not slow enough, let's go slower, And so I started implementing that with the high schools, just literally copying what we would try and do, and just try and make sure that everything was right. And if it wasn't, then we would go as slow as we needed to. There wasn't necessarily a benchmark of what we needed to do when we were teaching fundamentals of, we need to get rolls this fast today, or these exercises, or we have to get into show music by whatever day of a camp. It was more about, we're going to spend as much time on it as it takes to get it right. So kind of figured out, how much kids can handle of that, because it depends. I mean, over time, they can become used to it and go, all right, like we can hype on going really slow and getting down to the details. But obviously, if it's a younger group, they can only last so long. And eventually, you got to start getting into something a little bit more fun. So we just kind of had this system, I think. I think especially playing wise in music, it was all about just starting fresh every single year. It really didn't matter what the group was achieving the year before. We always came back in the very next summer, the first day, and we started with, one note until lunch almost, it seemed like. And so it just would continue to build. I think with every program too, it's just more and more time. Obviously every year the kids are going to start to develop the same language that you're speaking. And so it gets a little bit faster, even though we're still trying, I try and hold them down. I go, oh, we got to go slow. But every year we're able to move faster. I think because they're just getting that experience, especially if they're hearing the same language at the middle school, and they're coming up to that.
But I'm so glad you said that, because I frequently get questions from people that will say, like, gosh, how do I get my group better? I want to be better. What do we need to do? Is there a clinician we need to hire? Do we need different costumes? The answer to all of that stuff is teach. You got to teach. You got to slow things down. You got to get in front of your students. Don't just have rehearsal hours. Don't just do another rep, but get in there. Get your hands dirty. Teach, educate, disseminate information, break things down for your students, build them up. That's the most powerful thing you can do to get your program moving in the right direction. And I think, Richard, you and your program currently are certainly a testament to that. You mentioned something a second ago that I want to pick your brain on a little bit. You talked about making sure that the information that you're giving at the high school level is similar in terms of vocabulary and in terms of messaging as to what students are getting at the middle school level. And this is actually one of the questions that we received from somebody in the community, and they were kind of curious about this for your program specifically. how are the beginner and or middle school percussion programs, how are they configured in your district, specifically in your feeders that lead into Burleson Centennial?
We start beginners in 6th grade. Our main feeder is Kerr Middle School. It's an incredibly well-rounded band program, fantastic directors. We have multiple directors from the high school that float down there every day to try and get, as much information to those kids as possible. And then also, once they get into 7th and 8th grade, we also have a middle school indoor drum line that we do, which we really get to hit a lot of the same stuff when you talk about the language that we're going to speak at the high school. But aside from the beginner class, where obviously they're going to be hearing the same terminologies, and really I'm going to be focusing on exactly what I want them to be, the best at to be successful through our program. There's so many things that they're set up with of as soon as they get into 7th grade, the middle school all region process. That's a big Texas thing. We can talk about that at the high school level for sure, because that's a big aspect of what we spend our year on.
Yeah.
But at the middle school level, they already start that process where they have to play a mallet etude, a concert snare drum etude, a timpani etude. And so they're able to we're making sure that every kid at the middle school can take care of all those things. And those etudes are usually far beyond what any of the literature is that maybe they're even playing in their concert bands, and whether it's at the 7th and 8th grade level, or usually even at the high school level, those same etudes are beyond what they're going to end up playing a lot of times. So when they can get through those things successfully, then they're going to be able to jump right in with those, full ensembles and be pretty successful. So we kind of have I would just say, not to try and hit two things at once with the middle school and the high school, but as far as how they at least align, we kind of flip things a little bit maybe than what a lot of people do, where we do a lot of concert discussion or in a lot of concert practices during the fall, actually, throughout this all region process. So then when we get to the indoor season, we're able to jump in with that. We know we've already hit a lot of the other things that the kids are going to really need to be successful. And so then we can really start diving in back into those techniques that we hit in the summer, or we are needing now for that new season. So the middle school drum line is a super cool thing. Andrew Klein is our director of that. He heads up the Kerr Middle School drum line. I'm down there every day. That we rehearse, getting to teach. We've got a great system where we're able to split up, and it's just a little mini high school. They're just really tiny little high schoolers. So those kids but they're so excited about it. And I think the best thing about that program too is that they get to go to a lot of the contests with the high school. They get to be there. The high schoolers are helping them push their equipment in, get their floor out, set up, and then vice versa. As soon as they're done, those middle school kids will be the first ones to sit down in the lot and ready for us to hit a note, and they're so excited. So every year that seems to go another level of the middle school program, just because they're exposed to it. They're getting to see it. They're committed. They're bought in on going on Saturdays to these contests. And that really helps too, I think, is getting that commitment already figured out. The middle school program, we've had kids who, it's not super extensive, but we've had kids who they can tell then that it's not for them. And so we can already kind of get that figured out. Or the kids who are totally bought in, then obviously they love it, but we're able to kind of figure some of those things out at an earlier level. And so that's been a really, really cool thing.
Yeah, and then you've got, kids that are chomping at the bit in 7th and 8th grade because they're seeing the high school equivalent. They're seeing what they're going to matriculate into, and they go, man, I can't wait to be a part of that program. I can't wait to have that, wear that badge, so to speak. But then, as you mentioned, you also get some kids that love it and they're in it, and then they see what the commitment is at the high school, and they go, I love music. I want to keep playing. I'm not sure that is for me, is the right fit for me. And just, man, the earlier that students can start to figure that out for themselves and figure out what their own personal goals are and how they want to spend their time, the better it is for everybody. So I love that idea. I want to talk for a little bit about music education in the state of Texas in general. And I don't want to ask you to speak on behalf of the entire state and everything that's happening, but I want to pick your brain on this a little bit. Obviously, the reputation around the country is that Texas has a huge focus and priority on music education. It's well funded, it's taken very seriously, and with that come a certain set of very high expectations for what students and for what ensembles are supposed to be able to do in a comprehensive music program in Texas. So I'm wondering if you might be able to speak a little bit to how you've been able to strike a balance between what is expected of a scholastic music program in Texas and your community and your ensemble's desire to also compete at the highest levels of the indoor percussion activity, because just with the success that Burleson Centennial has had in the last couple of years, skyrocketing through open and up into world very quickly, and then certainly planting your flag in world last year in terms of a serious program and one of the top in the country. I'm just really interested in how you strike a balance between all of those different demands.
Mm-hmm. We're in the thick of indoor season right now, and so to kind of work backwards, one of the big things, I'm sure everybody, Texas marching band is kind of a big deal. But then when we get to the spring, we still have UIL, the state, mandated competitions for our concert bands. So they're concert ensembles, sight reading, and the students, participate in that at the same time that they're in indoor. So to kind of back up and talk about how we're able to prepare for that, we just kind of switch things around. To where, like I said, when we're in the summer, we hit a lot of really strong fundamentals, so that then we know that the fall show is going to be fine. It's going to take care of itself. As long as we just don't get in the way, and we'll have a feature here or there. But we kind of try to not get overly stressed out about the fall drumline, I guess, situation. It's usually it's fine. So as soon as we jump into the school year, that's when the Texas all-region, all-state process music really comes out. And, students that participate in that, again, have to do a 2-mallet solo, a 4-mallet solo, timpani, and concert snare drum. And those etudes are incredibly long. It's pretty much, could be college audition material. So we start in with that process pretty much from the second week of school. Where the students have weekly pass-offs in the classes. We just break the music up into segments and ask the students to start working on that. We'll do master classes during their class time on that, just breaking down whatever that week's pass-off is, and really spending a lot of that time, like I said, developing the entire musician out of them. There's definitely a payoff of that process to them being musical when it comes to the indoor side of things. When we talk about shaping or we talk about touch, I feel like because they're competitive in all region process, like they can get maybe softer than a lot of people can when it comes to the edge of the snare drum, or really understanding how to fully shape a front ensemble phrase, because they're having to do that individually, and they're competing in that process too. And when they go to their auditions for the all region or all state process, it's pretty rigorous, and the students have to get up one at a time and play. So it's developing that inner confidence as well. Or even, for some, it's that inner struggle and that inner failure of like, that didn't go well. So what do I need to do in budgeting my time to be more successful with it? So, sometimes we'll have freshmen go through that process. It's not, and it's a beat down, but the very next year, they're a totally flipped individual because of that process and how it can be pretty grueling. And since we do pass-offs every week, that's how we actually determine their placement in their concert ensembles. So that's something where there's kind of some competition within the own Centennial Percussion program during the fall of, if I want to be in the top wind ensemble, then I have to be in the top 8 out of the 30 of us that are in this. It's not easy. So, it's been a really beneficial process in that. And the really cool thing is that then once a lot of the students have made the all region bands, so then they go to clinics and concerts with college directors and clinicians, and they come back from that. And so then to jump back into their wind ensemble or whichever ensemble they're in, it's not hard. And we can detail things because they're already kind of accustomed to that process.
Do you ever experience something with some of your students where they start to feel a sense of burnout doing all of these things, or do you feel like you've been able to strike a pretty good balance in all those things?
You can see it, and I think when it happens, I mean, it's kind of a one-on-one basis of, let's talk, try and develop that relationship of assessing how that student's doing. Every now and then we'll have a student that goes through that process, and yeah, it's just nonstop. They've done it either year after year. They've done it since middle school, and maybe they're sick of it. So we don't want to change the culture. We want to keep that going, but we'll still try and make sure that student doesn't burn out. Sometimes we'll do an alternative assignment that's still going to help create that sense of I've got to do something this week to better myself, aside from playing tenors or aside from playing just marimba or whatever. So
that was always my experience teaching too, for the many years that I was at Ayala, and we did marching band at a very high level and the indoor marching percussion ensemble, and then also concert percussion ensemble. And so you have students that are they're going through a ton of literature. They're trying to perfect things at the highest level year round. And you would get some that felt burnt out by a certain point, or, they were getting to the end of their junior year and they're like, man, I've been hard at this for a number of years. And I like what you said about, it's all about building that relationship with the students so that you can have that open conversation and you can figure out what's going to be the best fit for them. Certainly there are some programs that, it's not a perfect fit for all students necessarily. And it's helpful for them to be able to figure that out ahead of time and go, you know what, this is cool, but this isn't for me. The time commitment, the investment, the amount of competition. When you said, like, hey, I want to be in the top wind ensemble, I've got to be one of the best 8 at my school in this. And then I'm also trying to be, operate at a world-class level in this other thing. That can sometimes be tough. But I also like what you mentioned about trying to build a culture around your program. And this was always kind of my secret sauce with my schools was you develop this culture whereby they feel like it's just this way of life. Like they're all in. This is where my friends are. This is my passion project. It's my hobby. I do this instead of other things. And I don't feel like I'm missing out because I'm so super into this. And when you do that, you get massive returns from students. So it sounds like you're building a very similar culture with Burleson Centennial. It's awesome to hear.
I think there's kind of 2 pitfalls that can happen that I've noticed of. One is that they just don't, you're right, they don't have time a lot of times to do anything else. And so we have to be really careful about certain times a year and making sure that at certain times a year that we're making sure that it feels like an off season and it feels like a building process. That can be kind of a big deal. And then I think the other thing is, just even like private lessons, we have to be careful about, we obviously want every student in private lessons, but again, it's kind of always been my dream. Like I want every student in private lessons at our school, but I've kind of even looked at their time and when they're doing these things and go like, I don't know how some students can do that. And it's really hard to say that right now because I want them all to be in private lessons, but I've literally had to look at them sometimes and go, I don't blame you. Come say, Mr. Kearns, I just can't do it right now. And I totally get it.
So speaking of time, let's dive into the program just a little bit more. Tell me, in a typical week during indoor season specifically, what's the schedule look like for Burleson Centennial during a typical week?
We have 2 big rehearsals a week, Monday night and Thursday night from 5 to 8:30. Those are a lot of times gym time, but it just depends on how we want to do it. And then we also have an hour-long sectional one other day a week where we can just really grind out whatever details we're not getting. Those are definitely just music sectionals on that one other hour a week. Other than camps and where we would maybe be staging the show, that's really when we rehearse. is those times, because once we get, again, into this time of year, the students also have morning rehearsals with their concert bands. So they're in separate percussion classes. We have separated out in the past all the way down to, we've had a snare class, a quad class, a bass class, a front ensemble class, and keeping that all the way through the year. But they don't just do snare drum all day in that class. We hit whatever we need to hit. If it's time to hit music to fit in with the wind ensemble, then we can pull up recordings, or we can talk about technique and hit those things. If we're picking out percussion ensembles, we can ideally try and pick those for those groups of kids that might be within those. But we have the class time that is an advantage that that was another thing that we started way back at Palestine, was we just said, let's talk to the counselors, let's talk to the principals, and let's do whatever we can to make this fall into our favor. Instead of having so many kids where we can't get to them, let's treat those as sectional time. So then rehearsal is really, able to be really beneficial.
When you said you've got that 1 hour of sectional time a week, do those all happen concurrently, where it's 1 hour and snares, you guys are in a sectional, and tenors are in a sectional? Or is it like tenors are this time, snares are this time, marimbas are this time?
It's now, this year, we've got everybody is at the same time, and we have a great staff that's in, and so it's usually batteries all together. We're getting good weather right now, so the battery's outside, just trying to get the ears dialed in, front ensembles all together. But we have the ability to split more if we want. It just kind of depends on what the need is.
I think you mentioned a couple minutes ago, Monday and Thursday, the time frame was 5 to 8:30. Did I get those times right? So that's a 3.5 hour block, 2 days a week. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you utilize that over the course of the season. Does the balance of sectional versus full ensemble versus subsectionals, does that shift throughout the season, early to mid to late? How do you normally break down those blocks?
Definitely early season, it's split a lot, because we're continuing to either get more of the show out there for the battery, or the front ensembles learning new notes, or it's just really what we need is to be isolated and to hit comments towards everybody. This year's been a little bit different. We have a very unique setup where the pit is integrated in, and we've had major things that we've just always needed to work out, where the groups, they've rehearsed better together a lot of times this year, and we can still, with the staff that we have, jump in and target things that we need to, but we're able to always focus on some of the ensemble timing. So it definitely, this year we've determined it depends a lot on the show and what your program is needing at that time, but most years I think we may be ensemble 4 times before our first show, it seems like. So
one of the questions that somebody sent in ahead of time, they were wondering a little bit about your ensemble and how much time you devote to physical conditioning. Can you speak to that a little bit about the physical attributes of the ensemble?
We don't do a lot that's outside of it, because we like to use reps as that physical conditioning. If we see that we need it, we kind of address it. And I think that's a lot of indoor, even certain exercises or certain things. We don't necessarily have to play every exercise every day. If we need it, we address it. Same deal with physical conditioning. But when it gets time, we'll do multiple run-throughs back to back. That can do it. So, and I don't know, I feel like there's never enough time for those run-throughs, or never enough time for those reps. So me personally, it'd be really hard to dedicate stepping away from more time on those versus getting those repetitions of the show and actually conditioning themselves by what they're doing. And then we can assess, even after that run through, you are tired right now. That is why that was not a good run. So, we need to be more aware of that when we're taking rehearsal at a faster pace, or those kinds of things. But the kids handle it really, really well, especially this year. It's a very physically demanding product. Just even getting everything set up, they're already getting a workout. So
awesome. I got one other question that was sent in ahead of time that I think now would be a good time to ask this of you. It's a philosophical question. It's one that I think about a whole lot. So I want to pick your brain on this. What's your philosophy early season? Do you try to get the beginning to end production on the floor as quickly as possible? Or is your approach to perform smaller segments that are more refined and more filled in and just kind of slowly produce it over the season?
It's probably more of the refined towards the beginning, with an understanding that we're willing to change a lot if we need to. But let's get a lot of details as we teach it. Let's try and clean a lot as we teach it. So, that usually puts us at a process of maybe by the first show, we're playing a little over half. And then the thing I like about that is that sometimes even though you have your end product and goal, or in mind, and you know what it's going to be, the way that you get there, you still have the way to, you still have the freedom to adjust it and to make those changes if needed, as you still continue to get the back half of the show put together.
If you would, just give me some ballpark figures here. Approximately how long is the presentation this year?
It is about 7 minutes and 10 seconds with a pre-show.
Okay.
I have a pre-show that bumps it up to about 8.
So basically, first show of the season, you've got about 3.5 on the floor, 3 minutes, 30 seconds ish.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when was the first show of the season for you guys this year?
February 9th.
Okay. So right there at the beginning of February. When, over the course of your season, when did you have the full, maybe it's not all filled in yet, but we played the first note to the last note. When was the first full presentation at a competition?
It was March. No, yeah, about March 2nd.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a real good rule of thumb for people to use whenever I get a chance to talk about it, or whenever somebody asks me. I first of all say, well, you've waded into thick waters here. But yes, having half of your show ready to go at the beginning of the season rather than just, a third or even only 25% of the show is definitely the way to go. And I think the first full performance in March, if everybody can have their full first to last note out there, it really sets the students up for a lot of success come the end of the season, because they've got multiple weeks to refine before they get into a circuit championship or world championship kind of scenario. So that I think that's a perfect pace that you have there, and to know that you're able to have that pace and also fill in and refine things as you go. Fantastic. All right, so Richard, I want to change gears here just a little bit, and I want to walk down memory lane for a second, and just point out a couple of things that I think are remarkable about the Burleson Centennial program. If I remember correctly, the Ensemble's first trip to WGR World Championships was 2017. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what was the end result in their very first trip ever to World Championships in 2017?
We were Scholastic Open champions, so it's a shock. So it was a great week. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember, so I got to say something, and apologies to all of my former programs and ensembles that were in open class, but that 2017 open class show is, I think, my favorite Scholastic Open show that I've ever seen. I remember I saw the ensemble for the first time at the Dallas Regional. I'd never seen Burleson Centennial before. I saw you guys at that regional, blown away. I was like, this is going to be something to see at the end of the season. And certainly your performers did not disappoint when it came to World Championships. But I like to hold that ensemble up as an example of, good programming and good teaching and preparation is the key for success. There are so many programs that talk to me every year, and they're like, we've never been to World Championships before. So, we have our site, we're just going to go A this year. We've never been before, and we're hoping to be, to come in, block a place, whatever the case may be. So many people chalk up that experience. We have to go there 5 times before we can really try to, no, you don't. You teach your kids, you develop a great program, you show up, you make sure they're prepared. And even on a first trip out, students can have a tremendous amount of success. So that's the first thing I want to mention. I guess my first question for you is, in 2017, new program, you've only been there, this is your second year there at that point?
Mm-hmm.
So what prompted you and the ensemble to make the decision to travel to World Championships there in your second year with that program?
It was kind of the plan all along of if we were going to be at this school, we really wanted to make sure that that was an option and that that was going to be something that the group could do. So really, even the first year that we were there, it was next year is a Dayton year. We really want to make sure that this is happening. Start talking to administration and parents and making sure that people are aware of that. We put together a show. Brian Harmson does our front ensemble arranging and is just the man with programming and what he's done. And we put together a show for that first year that I was at Centennial that was supposed to be a filler show. It was supposed to be like, well, let's save the good stuff for Dayton. That show did really, really well. The group adapted really well. The first year, we just watched a ton of videos. We were constantly pulling up world-class videos. I mean, we would take class time and do this. We would sit down, and instead of drumming that day, that year, it was more important that we watch this school and this school or this independent world ensemble and talk about and have open discussions about what they were doing. So we knew then that we wanted to go, and since that group did really well that first year, and the next year was, right away we felt like it was going to be a pretty good group. But I think the hard thing for me was I'd been a number of times and I didn't want to lead them on. That's for sure, because you still got to get there. You got to get down that ramp safely. You got to hope everything works. And so I didn't want to lead them on as to what you got to do, and I think that's the way it is in any class. It's every day. You still have to live to play the next day. So, but that was definitely the goal all along, was that by the second year we would go. It wasn't necessarily the goal that we would go every year after that, but then since we had success, we were able to keep doing that.
Was there, since it's a new group of students, it's a new group of parents, you've been before, you have that experience of what it feels like to be in Dayton and be in the lot and, travel down the ramp and all that other kind of stuff. But new students that have never had that experience, new parents that have never had that experience, was there any trepidation on their part going into this?
The parents that first year were really great. They were awesome. They were really excited. I think same kind of deal of trying to, as we're watching videos with the kids, we're doing the same thing in a sense with the parents of when we're having a Dayton meeting. I always put the WGI montage up. So like as soon as the parents come in and we sit there, we're about to start the meeting, like we kill the lights and we turn the montage on, like from, world-class finals night, and crank up the music so it feels like you're there. So it's like, oh, this is a great thing. This is awesome. And really, even as they're coming in, we're playing WGI videos for them and just trying to make sure that they're aware of what this is, that their kids are getting to be a part of. So getting it going the first time was actually not too bad. Keeping it going every year it develops new struggles for sure. So.
Absolutely. I mean, the only thing tougher than climbing the mountain is trying to stay up at the top of it year over year over year. I'm sure you and I'll both be talking about that for years to come. I want to jump into classification for a second because this is always at a lot of people's the forefront of their mind, especially this time of the year going into World Championships. I know the steering committee and the admin team just finished hundreds of classification reviews, and there have been a number of groups that were reclassified recently, and they all have trepidation going into this, which is certainly normal and natural and part of the process. You've been through this once before. You mentioned at the very beginning Azle High School, and when they, a number of years ago, were reclassified from Scholastic Open to Scholastic World, about this time, I think it was, a few weeks before World Championships. And so all of a sudden it's, hello, welcome to World Championships. By the way, you're world class. Jump in here. The water's going to be fine. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience for you?
Sure. Obviously, when I got the email, I think for a second my stomach sank and I was shocked, but then realized, it's, first off, it's an honor, and maybe it wasn't part of the original plan, but I think anytime you're moving up, it's first off, it's a compliment. It might mean some different things. It might not mean that you're going to get to play every day, but it means that the activity is noticing what you're doing and saying you are at this level. And I think relaying that to the kids is really, really important. That year we went up and we didn't, at that point, I kind of think the goal was just keep keep playing as long as we can, see what happens. We were 16th, so we missed finals by 0.3, and I promise you we were the happiest 16th place group ever. They talk about that one group, that group that's one out, and we were thrilled. That was a huge accomplishment for us. But I think it's kind of one of those things that a lot of, at least if the group's ever on the line, a lot of times that you're on the line, and so you kind of maybe are thinking about that hopefully through the season. So that group specifically, I knew we were on the line. We wanted to be really competitive in open class, but when we got the bump, it changed a lot. Getting up there and getting to perform at UD every day, and world class was the goal for us. So it was just an honor. It was so exciting to get to be around those other groups, and to get to play. And there's just more that comes, I think, with each class. Like I said, it was a really great experience for us, even though it was kind of stomach wrenching for a minute. So to know where we were going to be.
Yeah, it always is. It's a tough thing to get and receive word about, and everybody's first impulse is like, oh my gosh, because you think about the top of that next class, like, hey, you're world class, and you immediately think of the medalists or the perennial finalists that have been there over and over and over again. And then once you step back for a second and you go, oh my gosh, my ensemble is a part of this conversation, and world class is much deeper than just those top couple of medalists, or even open class is so much deeper than just some of the people that end up in finals or with medals at the end of each year. That I'm so happy to hear that it was such a positive experience. And I just think it speaks volumes that your students would just miss out on performing on Saturday night, which there's nothing like performing on Saturday night, but they would miss out on it by so little and be literally one spot out, but then still be over the moon and elated. That really speaks positively to you and your program setting expectations ahead of time and making it about experiential things more than competitive success or a placement or a score or something like that. And so I'm so enchanted to hear when people have done that, and then when you can see programs celebrate their success in a way that other people might look at and go, oh, they came up one spot short. No, that all has to do with how you define things for your program. And I love hearing how you and Azel defined it back then. I want to pivot a little bit and talk again about Burleson Centennial, because they were fantastic in 2017, Scholastic Open champions. And then you very quickly made the decision to promote yourselves into world class for the next year, which anyway, I just kind of want to open it up for you to talk a little bit about what went into that decision and deciding to move yourself between an intermediate paradigm and then tackle the challenge of an advanced paradigm, and how you make that program for your decision, or that decision for your program.
Mm-hmm. We had a really successful year in 2017. We had last year, so 2018, we had 13 seniors in the group. So we knew it was going to be an older group that would be able to handle it, and a lot of experience. I think we were only missing 2 or 3 kids from the previous season. So just kind of looking at least competitively where we were, add more time, add more of we're speaking the same language and getting more and more experience under our belt. Can spend more time now drumming as opposed to watching videos. We're going to get better, and we're going to probably be able to feel like we can compete in that class. And then again, since I guess I'd been there before, I mean, world class for us was just, again, it was the ultimate goal. We weren't in a hurry to feel like we had to get there. We didn't feel like it wasn't like, hey, year 3, we should be world class. But we could tell that that's where we needed to be. And so at that point it was, let's go, all in. But we didn't really change a lot on how we approached things. I mean, we did write a more demanding show. But again, it was just more was more time. It was more time back in the summer playing those one notes, but those one notes were a lot better this time. And so we were getting more time, more experience with the kids, and everybody's adapting better to each other. The system's just better in place every year. So it seemed to lead to things being successful pretty quick.
Did the thought ever cross your mind during that in-between time of like, maybe we'll come out and open again next year, and then we'll see if somebody tells us that we're in the wrong spot and we need to move up to World? Did that ever run through your mind?
Honestly, with that group, no. Because like I said, I felt like they were really experienced, and we were ready. 17, we were definitely, we felt like we were open, but we knew going to that next year that we weren't going to be, so having played that game of we got bumped, let's just not deal with that. Let's just start right in, and let's be prepared, and let's write a show that we know is going to be geared towards that, as opposed to trying to write a show that's maybe walking the line, and then if we need to, we could beef it up later. I mean, that was never our plan. It was just let's start out with what can the kids handle. It's right here. Let's push it to here, and we got time to do it.
I think that's such a great approach to have. And obviously, it's great when it works out like that, when you can look at your program and go, man, we're bringing most of these students back. We were definitely intermediate last year. We are ready to take a step forward. We know we were in the upper echelon of intermediate previously. So the next step, like there's nowhere else to go and open. The next step for us is to make that leap into World. And obviously, it's not that clear cut for everybody all the time. Right. I spend I have so many conversations throughout the year where, I'll be at a regional and a group will come out and they're in the wrong class. They've registered for the wrong place. They don't fit in there at all. And so I'll come talk to them after their prelims performance. They're like, we thought we were open, or we thought we were World, but we just wanted to wait and see what you guys had to say about it. And I always I shake my head like, why? Just, if you thought you were ready for the next thing, embrace it right from the beginning. Adopt it as a program. Write a show using intermediate skills. Tell your students that they have intermediate expectations right from the jump, rather than toiling in perhaps the wrong paradigm and then getting nudged by somebody at some later point. So
I think the only thing I would say on that was where we were as a program. I think some programs they obviously would hopefully make the design choices if they know what class they're supposed to be in, but maybe the reason that they're staying is because there's certain parameters of, we need to, if we can medal, then our school district's going to notice, and we're going to be able to get, it might be a funding thing, and maybe we can keep going to Dayton, or we can add a director, or who knows what. But there's certainly advantages towards being successful in every class that I could understand. But again, the show has to be designed towards fitting into that class and what the students can do.
Well, and I always try to tell people when I have a chance to talk about it, don't design an A-class show or an open class show or a world class show. Design a show for the students that you have in front of you. So if you're looking at students and they're capable of advanced things, give them advanced things to do. If you look at your snares and they're capable of advanced things, but your tenors are capable of intermediate, then you give advanced things to the snares and intermediate to the tenors. Like, don't design a show for a class, design a show for your ensemble. Then look at your ensemble and go, is this basic? Is it intermediate? Is it advanced? And put yourself there. And yes, there are some tough calls. Every year we see dozens of groups that are right on the bubble. Like, you look at it and you go, it's 51%, 49% between these two classes. And yeah, we have a system in place for that. And we've got a bunch of people that can faithfully look at everything. So I know it's not clear cut for everybody, but I see so many each year that, will come out and will be misclassified. Like, we're not talking a promotion. We're talking, it needs to be reclassified to this other place. And you talk to them and you go, hey, has anybody told you that you might not be basic? And they go, yeah, we were just waiting for the regional for you to, no, don't do that. Jump on it. So I love hearing you share the same thing and walk us through kind of what the process was for your program. So you had obviously been down this road before, had worked with a world-class group, had taken them to world championships. But now new program, new students, new directors, new community, new parents. Were you nervous about making the jump to world with them at all?
I guess the only thing is that sometimes when, you know, if the success comes quickly, sometimes the infrastructure is maybe not quite there, you know.
Yep.
And we are incredibly blessed. We have a wonderful community, a wonderful district, an amazing parent organization. But it's tough to go to then try and turn around and go to Dayton every single year. So I think for us, it was more about logistics of making sure we could do that. Versus, like I said, I felt like the group was going to be okay if we just had more time and stuck with what we knew we were trying to do with them as far as educationally. So, but that's a really big thing that that I've learned, I guess, in the last few years more than ever, is that when the success, if it does come fast, it does create some different issues if you're trying to, you know, stay in the game. And again, it's not about staying in the game competitively as much as just like we want to keep going every year, you know, and got to figure that out. You know, we haven't been doing this for 10 or 15 years to where it's like it's just what we do. It's like, yes, we're hoping to go again.
Right. Well, and for many programs, they're able to do that time and time again, and kind of plan for that. Like, hey, if you're in this program, we're going every single year. But when you first start making those commitments, there's no guarantee. There's no long history of, hey, we've been going every year for 10 years. We've been going every year for 1 year, and we'd like to go for 2 years and then 3 years. And it takes a little while to build that infrastructure and to build that sense of commitment around it and sense of programmatic identity. Like, who are we as a program? We're a program that competes at the world-class level at world championships every single year. That's a tough thing to be able to dive into.
For sure.
So the last one kind of on this topic, somebody emailed a question and you kind of touched on this already, but I'm wondering if you have anything else to add. When the Centennial program moved from open class to world class, what changes, if any at all, did you make to the musical and visual training program for the ensemble?
Again, training, it wasn't really much. You know, it was just, again, more time, you know. Musically, it just in the design, I think we were a lot more aggressive and trying to make sure that we were doing everything we could. Like I said, we tried to think about what the kids could do, and we tried to make sure it was always right here, so that by the end of the season, we knew we'd be able to do that. That was really it. I mean, I think anytime if you're at the top of one class, you're probably going to be somewhere okay into the next class. Not always, but so it was just more about, like I said, more time, and then just how we chose to design the product.
That's great. And being intentional with those design choices ahead of time really can make all the difference in the world for some people when you go into a season knowing that you want to do certain things and utilize certain devices. You can back up and build your training program around that to make sure that you've got the skills and the capabilities necessary to tackle all those things. I would love to chat with you a little bit about design, and programming and things like that. And everybody that's tuning in live, if you have any questions for Richard or any questions for myself about anything we've covered tonight or anything we haven't covered tonight, you can submit those at any point, and we'd be happy to take those questions. It strikes me that with your Centennial program, you have carved out, just in the last couple of years, such a strong identity for the ensemble in terms of some of the programmatic choices you make. Certainly, the shows all seem to center around a bit of a spiritual approach to programming and to some of the narrative and things like that. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about where that comes from, why you've kind of chosen or adopted that as your identity, and how you bring those things to life through your programs each year.
Sure. Yeah. It started, I guess, with the 2017 show, The Harvest, where we knew all along we wanted to have a really spiritual feel to it. That was the whole premise of the show, was that it wasn't just wheat in a field, is that it was more beyond, and that we all can assume that there's more beyond, but we can't think outside of that. This is how we're made. So we ended up finding at that point, Sam Robson is a YouTube sensation. He does all these musical layered a cappella versions of different, all kinds of music, but specifically hymns. We already had this show in mind, and then I walked into the office one day, and Mr. Murphy, our head director, was listening to this Sam Robson version of "I Need Thee Every Hour," and it was so moving and powerful that I said, "That's it! Like we have to use that in this show." It literally almost tells the story for us. And it was just kind of a moment in time where we just really started to make this connection of how we could choose to maybe tell the story, with, not necessarily having to use narration, but using song lyrics to do that, from maybe things that we don't have to rewrite the lyrics. The lyrics are right there for us to use and are telling the story that we want if we're able to find the right thing. So that was a really awesome find, was this guy, Sam Robson. A lot of people, I'm sure, are aware of who he is. So the next year, we wanted to do something very different. We didn't want to be anything like the year before, except for how maybe the show made you feel. We didn't want to go in a different direction other than that. So we were able to use Sam Robson again to do the Down to the River to Pray, since we were very prisoner-esque and then seeking salvation. Immediately it was the "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" baptism scene that came to mind as the show was starting to be discussed. And listened to all these different versions, the Alison Krauss version of that song that was in the movie, all these different versions. And again, I think just fate or beyond, it was one of the last days before we actually wrote that movement, just scrolled through Sam's pages, and he had done Down to the River to Pray. It's like, this is unbelievable. Like, we know we want to use this song, and he's already done this. It was an amazing thing. So we had him re-record it for us on how it would work. But again, it just, how we wanted to tell that story last year was, we didn't just want to be prisoners, and we didn't just want to go down that same path. We wanted to make it about beyond that, and finding, more within you, and being able to have redemption and salvation. So to be able to,
I think that's the heart of a great program. What are you doing this year? Well, the performers are going to be prisoners. Okay, cool. I feel like I've seen that before. You have, but not like we're going to do it. And great programming is about folding those layers in and starting with something that seems simple, an elevator pitch, 2 sentences. I can kind of tell you what we're doing. Prisoners seeking salvation. Cool. Got it. And then when you start to look at all of the different devices and all the different tools that you utilize to connect with the audience, that's great design. And I love kind of the glimpse that you've given us on A, where some of that stuff comes from, and then B, some of the resources that you've used in terms of source material to bring that stuff to life. Especially like going down this road and knowing, like, I want to use this piece of music, and I've listened to the Alison Krauss version, and I'm inspired by this. Let me go see if the person whose music connected our show for us last year has, oh my gosh, we have a cover of this. It's meant to be.
And beyond that, this year, we, spoiler alert just a little bit, if you haven't seen the show yet, we have a Sam Robson connection again. But it was again, a crazy thing. If we had this show in mind, and instead of saying, here's the song we want to use, we literally found the exact song that would take care of telling the story of our show for us. So the lyrics to the song are everything you pretty much need to know, other than there's some opening narration. And it's just been an amazing process. He's a great guy to work with. He's done our narration for us at the beginning of the show this year. He'll re-record things. We just have a great relationship. We just feel really, really blessed to have him.
Awesome. Hey, we've got one question from the community over here. Says, when getting ready for next year's show, what comes first for you? Is it music, design, theme, costumes? Where do you start when you're trying to put together an original concept and a new show and a new path to go down?
It's usually the theme for us. And then we start picking, if we're going to have, we decide at that point if we need music that's been done, or if we want to, Brian's going to write it on his own. And then, we'll kind of take, I think, probably the standard process of, if we've got that theme figured out, then we need to start figuring out the aesthetic of the show pretty quick. What do we want this thing to look like? I thought Don Click's webinar a couple of weeks ago was fantastic, just talking about that, about seeing color palettes or finding a picture and knowing that that's the look of the show that you want to have. And then you start piecing things together from there.
And I think one of the things that you do so well in your programs, and it's not just you, I mean, there's a team of people that are helping to design it, but one of the things that I have noticed from the Centennial program the last couple of years is just how authentically you're able to connect with the audience. It's always something that has a very strong emotional component to it that starts to transcend this art form. I'm not a huge fan of the phrase, but you hear lots of people throw on the phrase of just, it's drums in a gym. And I think that undercuts some of what this activity can be. And I think the Centennial program does that really, really well, where you take drums in a gym and it gets elevated. How much of that is planned and intentional ahead of time in terms of the identity that you're trying to bring forth with the ensemble?
Well, we definitely haven't tried to force the identity. Like I said, there's been happenings of beyond me that has led to this, clicking this right at this time, and that all of a sudden is exactly what we need. I think we do want to approach our shows in a unique way. Like you said, if we're going to do Prisoners, let's take it somewhere that we haven't done it before. And at least for the time being, every show we want to do, we want to make you feel really good. And we want to make you feel really good about something. That's kind of been our thing, about something that maybe you aren't used to feeling good about. In 2017, it was wheat. I mean, really, do we, care? I think it was Jim Dwyer said, I mean, really, should I care about my bread? I mean, but it's like, it wasn't that. It was a metaphor. Last year it's Prisoners. Who could love Prisoners? Well, I mean, if it's done right. And again, this year, I mean, I think it's just a connection to something more beyond. So, I think just the way that the shows make you feel is planned, but not necessarily always how we go about making that happen.
Yep. Hey, moving away from design for a little minute, Brian is on and has a question for us. His ensemble recently was reclassified from open class to world class. I think it was just 2 days ago that he got the notice on this. So he's wondering, he says, we're a very young group who's going to Dayton for the first time ever, kind of like, well, you have a little bit of experience with this. What advice do you have for first timers that are trying to compete at the world class level?
I think maybe this doesn't answer the question like he wants, but getting to be a part of that is huge. Getting to be a part of the world-class scene is such an honor. And I always try and, again, aside from what we're going to do competitively, we're going to try and make sure that we're just trying to put the best version of the group out that day that we can. We can't change that, especially this late in the game, towards what's going to make us successful. We just have to keep trying to be the best version of ourselves that we can be. But man, I think just for any group in Dayton, like, build it into your schedule to watch as much as possible. We try and drop the kids off at UD Arena as much as we can when it's independent world time on prelims and semis, and getting up close to it, because when they can sit up close to those world-class groups and get that in their ear, they come back different. They get on the bus going home and they sound different on their practice pads. Yep. And they go, why couldn't you sound that way last week? But they're so motivated and excited, and they just get that in their ear. They see it and they breathe it. So I think if it's how to stay in the game of that, it's be around it as much as you can, and don't get too caught up in that week to where you miss the opportunity to see as much as you can.
Yeah, I think the week of World Championships is my favorite week of the year, without a doubt. And I think I've been fortunate to take a number of programs there for their first time ever, a couple of times in my career in the activity. it is a life-changing experience when you're able to bring a set of students there for the first time, and they're both able to have their own experience of warming up and performing, but then just being around everything else and seeing all of this other stuff. It's amazing. Everybody should do it. Everybody should bring an ensemble. If your ensemble has been several times, find a new ensemble and bring them. There's just no other experience quite like bringing somebody for the first time. So Brian, I would say, regardless of what class you're in, love every second, soak up as much of it as possible, and know that your students will come back profoundly changed, with renewed work ethic and drive and enthusiasm and all that other kind of stuff. In terms of competing in world class for the first time, I've been fortunate to have a couple of groups have that experience too, and to be out on the lot and warming up, like your first time in world class, and you're like, hey, it's Dartmouth right over there. They're warming up. Like, we're warming up at the same time as this program that we've looked up to. For me back in the day, it was like, Mission Viejo is right over there. We're in the same class as they are now. And that stuff's really cool. And for the concert idiom as well, like I remember the first time Ayala was in world class, it was like, Fort Mill is right over there warming up right now. And we are in the same conversation with all that. So win, lose, or draw, even if we get bested by 15 points today, we're a part of this conversation. We all shared the parking lot at the same time, and we're all going to show up on the recap at the same time. I think that's the key is don't overthink it. Like, the show is still the show. The kids are still the kids. Warm-up routine, performance routine is exactly the same regardless of what class designation is at the end. But aside from that, just being in the moment and loving everything and trying not to define your season by competitive results or ordinals or scores or anything like that, and having a couple of other checkpoints to help define things for yourself is truly the most important thing. As an education first guy, I would love for all of the 200 plus ensembles that are going to world championships this year, for all of them to find some way that they can define success for themselves. Because if we only define success as being a finalist or being a medalist or being a world champion, we're talking about single-digit world champions that are going to walk away from world championships. And I refuse to believe that those are the only people that should feel great about their experience. So I think those are, for me, are the big takeaways about bringing a group, even if they're nervous about a new class. Just love every minute and define success on whatever terms you think are appropriate for your program. So that was much longer, I'm sure, than Brian wanted on that answer. Anyway, Brian, there you go. So Richard, we'll start to kind of head towards the finish line on this. I do have a couple of other things, though, that I'd love to pick your brain on. You've been in this game for a number of years now and have taught a bunch of different groups across a couple of different classifications. What are some mistakes that you've made in the past that you're sure to avoid in planning for each year now?
That's a good one. I think, like I said, don't get in too big of a hurry to try and have success, because it doesn't necessarily make things easier. It just opens up different problems, that you're going to have. So just enjoy the ride. There's definitely been seasons that I've gotten so into the grind about what's going on that, I feel like I've missed some amazing moments along the way. So maybe that's more of kind of a personal thing or a director thing, but we all take this really serious. But long story short, when you get done with the season, it's the end of April, it feels great, and May rolls around and June rolls around, and it's like, it's the same kind of no matter what your competitive success was. So it's just trying to make sure that you don't get overly caught up in it, because I think then you can still, when that happens, I think you kind of lock yourself out of certain creativity things. I've heard a lot of people talk about, not overanalyzing judge comments or things like that. If you know what your end goal is on target like that, I think that's a big one that I've really learned a lot more recently in the last few years has been, if you have your end goal in mind, take those comments for what they're worth and use them. But if you've got a path and a plan, stick with it. And hopefully it'll be able to work out.
Yeah. Feedback and insight is good. That doesn't mean all of it is applicable. And sometimes some of that stuff you could hear and it could be right, but not right for you and your students and your show at that point. And that's one of the things as an educator, you have to know how to filter through some of that feedback that you're getting and figure out what's really useful. What do I need to heed right now? And what would actually distract me from the path that I think we're on. Like, this piece of feedback is relevant because of the performance today, but once I'm done doing the things that I'm planning on doing with this, it won't be relevant 3 weeks from now. So I'm going to discard that one and dive in and be self-confident and self-assured with kind of the path that we're on for our program. I love that. I also want to pick your brain a little bit on the state of the activity in Texas. Obviously, we started off the conversation tonight talking about music education in Texas and how you strike a balance with everything and still have aspirations to succeed at a really high level in this activity. Administratively, we are seeing huge growth in Texas in terms of the indoor percussion activity over the last several years, both locally and in terms of regional participation, and especially in terms of the number of groups that are traveling out to world championships and are participating at that level. Where do you think things are headed in your home state?
Yeah, it's a really exciting time. There's been, groups that have had a lot of success out of Texas, but there's certainly never been this many in all parts of the state. I remember I used to compete down in the TCGC circuit, and the groups down there, seemed to have it way figured out, where other parts of the state, it seemed really behind. It's kind of not the case now. North Texas has come on really strong. There's just some great programs, but all across the state, down in the valley. So there's 3 circuits in Texas. There's TCGC, and then there's TECA, which is down in the valley, and then there's the North Texas Color Guard Association, which is up in Dallas-Fort Worth. And all 3 circuits have groups that are competing at amazing levels. I think especially open class in Texas, it's been strong for a long time, especially in the Houston area. But it's pretty exciting, the groups that are competing in there. I think the big thing too that we've kind of been waiting on that's really exciting now has been the participation at the higher level from the concert groups being willing to jump in and go to Dayton, because Texas and concert percussion ensembles are fantastic. And this year, I think, is going to be a really big splash of the groups that are going. North Forney, I've seen their show multiple times. It's amazing. Tomball has had amazing success. I think Clements High School just got promoted to world class. So all these groups in concert world that are they're just going to make such a big splash that it's just really, really exciting for that. And all in all, just to see, it's always been, I think, about the design in Texas that maybe has been a little bit lacking at times, and that is getting a lot better. So I think that's what's causing a lot of groups to, maybe it's causing, and it's a reflection of groups going to Dayton, because again, they're getting there and they're seeing it and they're understanding what's happening currently in the activity that's coming back. And you're seeing it impact even the marching band scene. I think in the WGI stuff, the indoor winds programs too in Texas, multiple world-class groups at the independent and scholastic world level, A-class, open class. So it's the same thing. I think musically it's really strong. And I think now that they're jumping in, they're having a lot of success really fast. It's really exciting.
It definitely feels like it's been building to this for quite some time. And I know we've looked at it and we're like, okay, we're starting to get some pockets of activity here and here. And this year, I'm not sure that you could say like there was ever a time when like the levee broke and all, but man, this year it feels like we have a number of groups that are participating at a very high level. Very, very exciting to see what's happening both within the state and also the number of groups that are going to bring what they do and what they've been doing so well for so long, bring that to world championships and share that with everybody else. Will be fantastic. You mentioned specifically Concert World. I can't wait to see those 3 ensembles in there with everybody else. And see the best of the best in that. And then the marching activity just continues to grow and grow as well, in terms of the number of people that are involved and the number of people that are taking steps forward with the design process and programming, and then the number of groups that are participating at regionals and world championships. It's awesome. It's very exciting. And I know it's been building to this for quite some time. Hey, Richard, we're going to wrap it up here for tonight. Before we do, though, I want to turn this over to you. I want to ask you basically, what do you love most about this indoor percussion activity? And I'll preface this, everybody, before I put them on the hot seat. Richard and I have known each other for a few years now, 5, 6 years, something like that. And he and I have gotten a chance to talk about this, philosophize about the activity. I would consider Richard one of the most passionate and enthusiastic people for the indoor percussion activity. So basically, Richard, I just wanted to turn it over to you and give you a chance to kind of share some of that passion and enthusiasm with everybody, because I think you're a great spokesperson for what this activity is all about and what I love about it.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I love it at all levels, but there's nothing like finals in Dayton. You know, it's just the fact that, I mean, I've said it to you multiple times, you know, I can smell the cinnamon nuts of UD Arena, you know, just anytime. Like, it's iconic. But that weekend in general, just getting to be around those groups on multiple things. Number one, I mean, I think for what activity, and maybe there are some out there, but to as far as the crowds and the exposure, puts high school students up on the same pedestal and level as the heroes of the activity, right? So I mean, if independent world is the NFL, I mean, the high school kids are getting to perform alongside that for the same crowds and getting that same exposure. That's just such a unique opportunity that is just so great for igniting the students' passion for, you know, percussion and music in general. And then same thing of just, I love getting to watch, just getting to watch, you know, at all levels. It's been our thing since we started taking Centennial to Dayton, that we go to A-class finals every year. And to hear our students come and get on the bus after watching A-class finals, and they are just blown away, jaws dropped, going, that group was insane, that was so cool, did you see that? I mean, it's like, because at that, it doesn't, the classification at that point, I mean, if they're at the top of it, it's great, you know, you got to be clean, you got to have great design. And so those A-class groups are amazing. It's so great. And I love getting to see that from our students. Open class, same thing, but definitely the top of independent world, when you get the best, it's just my favorite thing to sit back and see the best performers in the world and watch what the best designers are going to do and say, this is what it's going to take this year to be competitive. You know, I mean, I think that it's kind of been fun to watch the activity rotate in and out of trends where people are just trying things that you can tell. It's like, that's what it took this year to try and just make a splash and to stay up at the top of the game, you know. But to see when you've got the best players and the best designers and what can happen, man, I just love it. I'm just such a fan.
You and me both. I can't wait. But we're on the eve of the very best time of the year. I know most groups are heading out to circuit championships either this weekend or next weekend, or possibly even both of those, and then on to WGI World Championships. I can't wait. I'm over the moon excited about this and cannot wait to get there and see all of these groups and see all these amazing performers that have been pouring everything they have into these programs from all around the country, all around the world, really. Is a true treat. So for those that are watching and are going to be at World Championships, can't wait to see you there. If you see either Richard or myself, come up and say hello, please. We'd love to see you and love to hear from you. We hope it's a fantastic experience for you. If you bring in a group, we hope it's just the experience of a lifetime for all of your performers. There's nothing quite like it. The intimacy, the excitement, the energy in the room at all of our venues on all days of the competition is really just outstanding, all culminating in Saturday night, which is, I mean, there's just nothing quite like it. So only a few days away until we get there and fire everything up. Richard, best of luck to you and all of your students at World Championships this year. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and sharing all of your insight and your wisdom and your experience with all of us. And a big thank you to everybody that's been on the call with us tonight. And also has tuned into other webinars throughout the rest of the season. I really love getting a chance to do these and getting a chance to pick the minds of some of the coolest and most insightful and most giving people in the activity. And I appreciate everybody carving out a little bit of time to spend it with us and do that. We'll join you again next year as we kick off our webinars for 2020. And again, if you're at World Championships, come by and say hello. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Richard.